The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for 847 years before anyone heard it. Ambassador stood on the bridge of her survey vessel, her four eyes focused on the dead world below. Earth. The automated beacon had called it Earth. The signal was ancient, corrupted by centuries of drift, but its message was clear enough: catastrophic failure, environmental collapse, and a plea for help that would never be answered in time. Atmospheric readings are dire, Ambassador, her science officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. Oxygen levels toxic, radiation signatures consistent with large-scale nuclear warfare. Ocean pH levels indicate complete ecosystem collapse. Had seen dead worlds before. The galaxy was full of them. Species rose and fell, civilizations burned themselves out, and time buried their mistakes under layers of dust. She expected to find ruins and perhaps some interesting artifacts for the Council's museums. Nothing more. But something about this world felt different. There are power signatures, the science officer continued, surprise evident in his voice. Deep underground, faint but still active after all this time. Ordered the landing party prepared. 6 hours later, she stood in a massive underground complex carved into bedrock 3 kilometers below the surface. Emergency lighting flickered to life as their presence triggered ancient systems. The air was stale but breathable, maintained by fusion reactors that had somehow continued functioning for nearly a millennium. The complex was enormous. Corridors stretched in every direction, lined with sealed doors and darkened windows. The architecture was crude by galactic standards but impressive in scale. These humans had built an entire city beneath the ground. Ambassador, you need to see this, called one of her team members from a large chamber ahead. The room was a data archive, walls covered in storage systems that hummed to life as they entered. Holographic displays activated, showing images of Earth as it once was. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in a healthy atmosphere. Then the images changed. Cities burning, oceans turning gray, the sky filling with ash, a species destroying itself in slow motion. Translator worked frantically to decode the human language. The archive contained everything: historical records, scientific data, personal journals, video logs. She watched as humanity's final century played out before her eyes. They had known they were dying. The environmental collapse started in the early 21st century and accelerated beyond control. Wars erupted over resources. Nuclear weapons were deployed. The survivors retreated underground, but they numbered fewer than 50,000 by the year 2147. The Earth above was a tomb. Any reasonable species would have accepted extinction at that point. The galaxy had seen it countless times. When a civilization destroyed its, the survivors typically spent their final years in despair, fighting over scraps until the last one died alone. Humans did something else. Found the file labeled Project Phoenix and opened it. Her eyes widened as she read. The humans had decided that if they were going to die, they would die reaching for the stars. They took everything left on their poisoned world, every scrap of metal, every drop of fuel, every functioning piece of technology, and they built a ship. Not a small exploration vessel, but a generation ship designed to carry 8,000 people across interstellar space. The engineering was desperate and brilliant in equal measure. They had cannibalized entire cities, stripped mines that had been abandoned as empty, and pushed their failing technology beyond every safety limit. The ship they built, the Endurance, was a monument to stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable. Navigated through the files, reading construction logs, crew selection protocols, and farewell messages. She found video recordings of the last humans on Earth saying goodbye to friends and family who had been chosen for the ship. Some cried, some smiled. All of them spoke with a strange mixture of grief and hope. "At least some of us will make it," one woman said into the camera, her face lined with radiation sickness. That's more than we deserve, maybe, but we're going to take it anyway. The archive contained the complete mission plan. Automated probes launched decades earlier had identified an exoplanet 600 light-years away. It had water, a breathable atmosphere, and conditions suitable for Earth life. The Endurance would travel at 20% light speed, taking 850 years to reach it. Most of the crew would spend that time in cryogenic suspension, aging only a few years while centuries passed outside. It was a desperate gamble with nearly impossible odds. The ship might fail. The planet might be unsuitable despite the probe data. The crew might not survive the journey. But certain death waited on Earth, so 8,000 humans climbed aboard a vessel built from their world's corpse and launched themselves into the dark. Found the launch records. The Endurance departed on March 15, 2186. She read the final log entry from the ground crew, written by the last 7 humans left on Earth after the ship launched. We stayed behind to maintain the beacon and archive our history. If anyone finds this, know that we tried. We failed our world, but we did not fail each other. The last of humanity is reaching for tomorrow. We can ask for nothing more. The log ended 3 years after launch. The final entry was brief: fusion reactor failing. This will be the last entry. To whoever finds this, they went toward 442b. If you have mercy, look for them. Tell them we believed in them until the end. Stood in the silent archive, the weight of human extinction pressing down on her. She had the science officer calculate the Endurance trajectory and arrival time based on the mission parameters. The numbers appeared on her display, and her blood turned cold. If the Endurance had maintained its course and velocity, if the ship had survived the journey, if the crew had successfully revived from sleep, then humanity's last survivors would have reached 442b approximately 3 years ago. She immediately ordered a long-range scan of the 442 system. It was 800 light-years from their current position, but the Council's deep space monitoring network maintained sensor arrays throughout the galaxy. If there was any activity in that system, they would find it. The response came back 6 hours later. 442b showed signs of industrial development, energy signatures consistent with fusion power, orbital structures, atmospheric changes indicating terraforming efforts, and radio signals broadcasting in what the computer identified as the same language found in Earth's archives. Humans were alive. Ambassador sat in her quarters that night, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about those 8,000 people who climbed aboard a ship built from desperation and hope. They had drifted through the void for 8.5 centuries, frozen in time while their species crumbled to dust behind them. Most of them were probably dead now. Sleep was imperfect, and the ship's systems would have degraded over such a vast journey. But some of them made it. Humanity had looked at certain extinction and decided to run. They had taken their dying breath and used it to launch themselves into tomorrow. They had survived. Filed her report to the Galactic Council, detailing her findings and recommending immediate contact with the 442 settlement. She included all of Earth's archived history, the complete story of how humanity had died and yet somehow lived. But as she prepared to depart Earth's orbit, she made one final review of the archive. She wanted to be certain she hadn't missed anything important. That's when she found the second file. It was buried deep in the system, protected by encryption that had partially degraded over the centuries. When her team finally cracked it open, felt her 4 hearts skip simultaneously. The file was labeled Project Phoenix, Secondary Launch Schedules. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were construction plans for 47 additional vessels, smaller than the Endurance, each designed to carry between 200 and 3,000 people, and there were launch dates. The Endurance hadn't been humanity's only escape plan. It had been the first. After launching their greatest ship, the survivors on Earth had spent the next 4 decades building more. They refined their designs, improved their technology, and sent ships toward every potentially habitable world they could identify. The final vessel, the Persistence, launched in 2223 with just 200 colonists aboard. According to the records, it was the fastest ship ever built, capable of reaching 30% light speed. Earth's last 7 humans had died at the launch console, having given everything to send their species to the stars in every direction. Check the destinations: 48 ships, 48 different star systems scattered across 20,000 light-years of space, if even a fraction of them had survived. She ordered immediate deep space scans of every destination listed in the archive. The results arrived over the following week, and with each report, its understanding of humanity shifted. Energy signatures at 442b, radio signals from 667, industrial development on B orbital structures around Tau E. Humanity hadn't sent 8,000 people to one distant world. They had scattered their entire surviving species across the galaxy like seeds thrown into the wind. The last humans had looked at extinction and decided that if they were going to die, they would make death work for it. They would make death chase them across the stars, hunting them down world by world. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would run far enough and fast enough to survive. As her ship departed Earth's orbit, looked back at the dead world one final time, she had come expecting to find a tragedy. She had found something else entirely. She had found the birthplace of a species that refused to die. 200 years passed, and the galaxy forgot about Earth. The Galactic Council had more immediate concerns than a dead world and a scattered remnant of survivors. Wars were fought, treaties were signed, species rose to prominence while others faded into obscurity. The Council's vast bureaucracy churned on, managing an empire of 10,000 worlds. During those 2 centuries, humanity became an accepted part of galactic civilization. Human colonies appeared on the frontier worlds, small settlements of determined people with strange customs and an unusual intensity about survival. They integrated well enough, traded fairly, and kept to themselves. The Council noted them as another minor species among thousands. Nobody remembered that humanity had Nobody questioned why human settlements appeared scattered across 40,000 light-years with no clear pattern of expansion from a central point. They were just there, one more thread in the galaxy's vast tapestry. Nobody paid attention until military analyst OK started noticing patterns. OK was a species known for their analytical minds and obsessive attention to detail. She worked in the Council's Strategic Mapping Division, tracking the growth and movement of civilizations across the galaxy. It was boring work, mostly bureaucratic, but she approached it with methodical precision. She first noticed the anomaly while updating expansion projections for minor species. Human colonies were growing faster than expected, establishing new settlements at a rate that didn't match their population numbers. She flagged it for review and started digging deeper. The more she investigated, the less sense it made. Human settlements existed in 47 different star systems, none within 50 light-years of another. Standard expansion patterns showed species growing outward from in a rough sphere, establishing colonies in nearby systems before moving further out. Humanity's distribution looked random, scattered across the galaxy without any central origin point. OK requested historical records from the Council archives. She found ambassadors' report from 2 centuries earlier, detailing the discovery of Earth and the Endurance mission. She read about Project Phoenix and the 48 ships humanity had launched from their dying world. The numbers aligned perfectly. 48 ships, 47 known human colonies, plus historical confirmation of the 442b settlement. But that wasn't what made OK's blood run cold. It was the dates. The youngest human colony had been established 150 years ago. The oldest, 442b, had been founded 203 years ago. Simple math revealed that every human world was approximately the right age to have been founded by one of Earth's original seed ships. Humanity wasn't expanding across the galaxy. They were already there, had been there for 2 centuries, quietly growing in strength while the galaxy ignored them. OK dug deeper. She accessed trade records, diplomatic files, and cultural exchanges. She found that human colonies had been in regular contact with each other for at least 75 years. They shared technology, coordinated research, and maintained a loose political alliance they called the Dispersion. She interviewed human traders and diplomats, asking careful questions about their history. They answered openly, even proudly. They told her about the long sleep, the centuries their ancestors spent frozen in the dark. They spoke about Arrival Day, celebrated differently on each world but always marking when their particular seed ship reached its destination. They taught their children the same story. Earth died, but humanity scattered itself to the stars and survived. One human merchant, an elderly woman named Sarah, explained it to OK over tea in a station. "We nearly went extinct," Sarah said, her voice matter-of-fact. "Our ancestors destroyed Earth through greed and stupidity. They paid for that mistake with their lives, but before they died they made sure some of us would live. They built ships from the ruins of their world and threw us into the dark, hoping we'd find light somewhere. That's the dispersion. We're scattered because we had to be. You can't kill all of humanity if we're everywhere." OK absorbed this information with growing unease. "Your worlds maintain close communication despite the distances." "Of course," Sarah replied. "We developed quantum entanglement communication arrays about 60 years ago. Every human world is connected now. We share everything: technology, culture, scientific discoveries. We're 47 worlds, but we're one people." "And your government structure?" Sarah laughed. "We don't have one. Each world is sovereign. We coordinate when we need to, but nobody gives orders to everyone. That's by design. You can't cut off the head of something that doesn't have a head." That night, OK compiled her findings into a comprehensive report. The picture that emerged was startling. Humanity had gone from 8,000 frozen survivors to a civilization of 16 billion people across 47 star systems. They possessed technology refined by centuries of desperate efficiency, closed-loop recycling systems that wasted nothing, medical science advanced by the challenge of keeping frozen colonists alive for centuries, weapons designed by people who never forgot that something almost killed them all. Most concerning was their philosophical foundation. Every human child learned the same lesson their ancestors learned in Earth's final bunkers. Extinction can come at any moment. Survival requires constant vigilance, and a scattered civilization is harder to kill than a centralized one. OK presented her findings to the Strategic Council, a small group of military leaders and intelligence analysts who advised the Galactic Council on security matters. "Humanity represents a unique strategic problem," she explained, her report displayed on holographic screens around the chamber. "They possess no to threaten, no central government to negotiate with, no core territory that must be defended. Every human colony is self-sufficient and politically independent. They have survived extinction once and structured their entire civilization around ensuring it never happens again." One of the council members, a grizzled military commander named, studied the data with narrowed eyes. "Are you suggesting they're a threat?" "I'm suggesting they're impossible to conquer using conventional strategies," OK replied. "Every galactic war follows the same pattern: strike the, cripple the government, and the species surrenders. Humanity has no. They've deliberately distributed themselves to prevent exactly that scenario." "But they're peaceful," another council member argued. "They trade fairly, respect treaties, and cause no trouble." "For now," OK said. "But that's not the point. The point is that we have a civilization in our space that has been specifically designed to be impossible to eliminate. They learned from their extinction event and built something that can survive anything. That should concern us. The Strategic Council debated her findings for 3 months before filing the report in the archives with a low-priority flag. Humanity was peaceful and cooperative. There was no reason to worry about their unusual structure. The galaxy had more immediate threats to consider. OK returned to her routine work, but she couldn't stop thinking about humanity. She had seen their colony ships in the archived records from Earth. Desperate vessels built from scraps, held together by determination and prayer. And from those crude ships, humanity had built a civilization specifically designed to survive extinction. She wondered what would happen if someone tried to make them extinct again. Then she hoped the galaxy would never find out. 50 years later, her hope died when the Empire reached human space. They had been conquering their way across the galaxy for 300 years. They were efficient, ruthless, and followed a strategy that had worked on 200 civilizations before humanity. They chose their targets carefully, studying each species before attacking. They identified the capital, the center of government and culture. Then they struck with overwhelming force, breaking the enemy's ability to resist in a single devastating blow. The surviving colonies, cut off from leadership and coordination, typically surrendered within months. It was a brutal but effective approach. The Empire sprawled across 5,000 star systems, having absorbed dozens of species into their rigid hierarchy. They viewed themselves as bringing order to a chaotic galaxy, one conquest at a time. When their scouts reached human space, they expected another easy victory. Intelligence reports identified 47 human worlds, only 16 billion people total. A minor civilization, barely worth the effort. The diplomatic corps sent the standard demand: submit to the Empire or be destroyed. They expected negotiations, perhaps some token resistance and eventual surrender. The human response arrived within a week. It was brief. We have no capital, we are everywhere and nowhere, come and try. They interpreted this as defiance and activated their standard conquest protocol. They identified humanity's 3 largest colonies, 442b, B, and Tau E, and assembled an overwhelming invasion force. 200 warships, 1,000,000 soldiers, and enough firepower to reduce the 3 worlds to ash. The attack came without warning. The fleet emerged from hyperspace simultaneously at all 3 targets, achieving complete tactical surprise. Orbital defenses were destroyed within hours. Planetary shields collapsed under sustained bombardment. Landing forces swept across the surfaces, crushing all resistance. Within 2 weeks, all 3 worlds had fallen. 4 billion humans died in the assault. The claimed total victory and demanded the remaining human colonies surrender immediately. The surrender never came. Instead, something happened that they had never encountered before. The other 44 human worlds didn't collapse into chaos or despair. They didn't fragment into squabbling factions. They didn't surrender. They mobilized. They had studied human government structure and dismissed it as inefficient. Each colony was politically independent, with no central authority to coordinate military action. They expected confusion and disorganization. They didn't understand the dispersion. Every human colony maintained quantum communication arrays linked to every other colony. When 442b went dark, the other worlds knew within seconds. When B fell silent, the entire human civilization felt it. 4 billion dead wasn't a statistic. It was cousins, friends, and shared ancestors from the same siege ships. The human response was instantaneous and coordinated. Every colony activated defense protocols developed over 2 centuries of paranoid preparation. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels switched to warship production. Civilian populations began emergency training. Resources flowed between worlds through trade networks that turned into supply lines. Most importantly, Every human colony began sharing technology simultaneously. Weapons designs, tactical innovations, industrial techniques, everything was uploaded to the quantum network and distributed across all 44 surviving worlds within hours. They had never faced an enemy that could turn their entire civilization into a single coordinated organism in a matter of days. They had conquered species with centralized governments and rigid command structures. Those systems were efficient but fragile. Destroy the center, and the whole thing collapsed. Humanity had no center to destroy. They were a network, and networks were resilient. This next move was to attack the remaining colonies systematically, starting with the next three largest. They assembled another invasion force and struck at 667, 128B, and B. The battles were harder this time. Human defenses had been reinforced. Weapons systems had been upgraded. Evacuation procedures removed most civilians before they arrived. The three worlds still fell, but they cost dearly. 73 ships destroyed, 300,000 soldiers dead, and 6 months of grinding warfare. And when those worlds fell, the survivors evacuated to neighboring human colonies and continued fighting. The industrial base scattered, the population dispersed, the military reorganized. They conquered 6 human worlds in the first year of the war. They killed 9 billion people and occupied territory they considered secured. Then they discovered that conquering a human world didn't actually accomplish anything. Humans didn't fight to hold territory. They fought to survive. When a world became indefensible, they evacuated everyone they could and destroyed what they couldn't take. They seeded the conquered worlds with resistant cells that would spend decades making occupation costly. Then they rebuilt on other colonies and prepared for the next battle. The war ground on, 10 years, 20, 30. The conquered 14 human worlds, but the remaining colonies grew stronger, not weaker. Human technology advanced through desperate innovation. Their tactics evolved with each battle. Their coordination improved as quantum networks expanded. Most disturbing to the command was human psychology. Every species that had conquered eventually broke under sustained pressure. Population morale collapsed. Peace movements emerged. Surrender became inevitable. Humans didn't break. They couldn't. Their entire culture was built on the memory of Earth's extinction. Every child learned the same lesson. We have already died once and we survived. Everything after Earth is borrowed time. The destroyed human worlds and the survivors simply moved and kept fighting. They killed billions, and humanity mourned their dead while building more ships. They won every major battle, and somehow they were still losing the war. 60 years into the conflict, the empire began to fracture. The war was consuming resources faster than they could be replaced. Conquered species saw human resistance and began their own rebellions. The military, accustomed to quick victories, couldn't comprehend an enemy that treated defeat as temporary setback rather than failure. The breaking point came during the Battle of New Terra, a human colony that had been fortified for 3 decades. They assembled their largest invasion force ever, 600 ships, 5 million soldiers, and enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. The battle lasted 14 months. They eventually won, taking the planet at a cost of 400 ships and 2 million casualties. When they landed, they found the colony had been evacuated. The humans had spent 14 months bleeding the fleet while their civilians escaped to 4 neighboring colonies. The admiral stood in the empty capital city and realized they had won nothing. They had conquered an empty world at devastating cost, while humanity simply moved and continued existing. The war ended not with a human victory but with collapse. After 80 years of grinding conflict, the empire simply couldn't continue. Their economy was destroyed. Their military was exhausted. Their conquered species were in open revolt. Humanity hadn't destroyed them through superior force. They had simply outlasted them. They had survived long enough for their enemy to destroy itself trying to eliminate them. The peace treaty was signed on neutral ground, with representatives from 33 surviving human colonies in attendance. The Emperor asked the human delegation a single question: "How did you survive?" The human ambassador, an elderly woman who had been born during the war, answered simply, "We've already been extinct once. You can't kill what has already died." The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of the defeat. For the first time in galactic history, a major empire had been defeated not through conquest, but through an enemy's refusal to die. Okay, now Ancient, and serving as the Council's chief military advisor, addressed the assembly. She held a small container filled with dark soil, a fragment of Earth preserved from Ambassador's original survey 600 years ago. "We thought we understood what happened on Earth," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We found a dead world in the species that had destroyed itself. We called it a tragedy and filed it in our archives. We were wrong." She displayed images of Earth's underground complexes, the Endurance launch facility, and the 47 seed ships humanity had built from their world's corpse. "Extinction wasn't humanity's end," she continued. "It was their beginning. They took the death of their world and turned it into a survival strategy. They scattered themselves across the galaxy and built a civilization that cannot be killed because it has no heart to strike, no center to destroy. Every human colony is sovereign. Every human world can rebuild. Every human remembers extinction and refuses to accept it again." She placed the container of Earth's soil on the podium. "The learned what we should have understood 600 years ago. You cannot conquer a species that has already conquered death. Humanity didn't defeat them through strength. They defeated them through impossible, stubborn, unreasonable persistence. They survived because survival is all they know how to do." The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from 1,000 worlds stared at the dark soil from humanity's grave. "They built an empire on this," OK said quietly. "On death and desperation and the absolute refusal to surrender. And now that empire spreads across the galaxy, carried by a species that learned the hardest lesson existence can teach: adapt or perish, scatter or die, endure or fade." She looked out at the assembled representatives. "Humanity will never be the largest civilization. They will never be the most powerful, but they will always be here, scattered across the stars, impossible to eliminate. Because 800 years ago, the last humans alive decided that if extinction wanted them, it would have to chase them across eternity. And they're still running." In human space, children learned the same lessons their ancestors learned in Earth's final bunkers. On every human world, in parks and government buildings and schools, there stood monuments made from Earth's soil, encased in transparent steel. The inscriptions varied slightly from world to world, but they all carried the same message: "Here lies our grave. We built an empire on it." And somewhere in the darkness between stars, automated beacons still broadcast Earth's distress signal, screaming into the void, not calling for help anymore, but serving as a reminder, a warning, a promise. Humanity had died once. They would not die again. The galaxy had learned to accept this truth. A species that survived planetary extinction by scattering itself to the winds could not be conquered, could not be eliminated, could not be stopped. They were everywhere and nowhere, dead and alive, defeated and victorious all at once. They had turned extinction into empire, and the empire would endure until the stars themselves went dark.